Okay, welcome everyone for our first General Assembly for SUNY BDS of the fall 2025 semester. We tend to have these General Assemblies every 2 weeks, so typically the second and fourth Tuesday of the month. And it seems like 7:30 is working out to be a good time. So we tend to, now this is not in stone, but we tend to have our second Tuesday of the month be campus updates, and the students that are organizing around the SUNY campuses will present on what they've been up to since the last General Assembly or campus update, just updating everyone so we're all in the loop of what's happening all over SUNY. And then the fourth Tuesday of the month, we typically have some programming, some kind of presentation that we either invite speakers or our students and our organizers present material. So we don't always record, but this series, where this is the second installment of a series we just started a couple weeks ago, or I think maybe July, I'm not sure. Anyway, it was we had back in June, I believe it was, we had a joint SUNY CUNY event that called out the Board of Trustees for both SUNY and CUNY for their complicity in the genocide. CUNY. See, I'm upstate. I should say CUNY, not CUNY. But anyway, SUNY and CUNY, and we had a tribunal out on the sidewalk in downtown Manhattan where the SUNY Board of Trustees was supposed to be meeting, but they got scared and they moved to someplace else. But we had the tribunal anyway, showing their complicity. And so the first GA of the series was called SUNY Complicity, and we reenacted that tribunal and we made the statements that we made. And so those are recorded and those will be going up on our YouTube channel. The second presentation is by Environmental Science and Forestry. Is that how you say it, right? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. I always mess it up. And they are a model for, possible divestment and by divestment in the SUNY system. They have done some movement towards that and significantly. And so we know it can be done at SUNY. It was done really early on. You're going to hear the story. And we wanted to start off on a positive note, but then we're going to follow with the complicity on all the other campuses that have done absolutely nothing. And specifically, University at Buffalo, we're going to have a presentation of their complicity on September 9th at 7:30, which is a Tuesday as well. Um, and somehow that ended up being it's off kilter, so that's not campus updates, but whatever. We'll send out emails to give everybody a heads up of what the plan is. And then we also will follow with Stony Brook complicity, and I'm not sure in what order, and also Albany complicity and possibly Binghamton complicity. So we'll go into specifics of each of those campuses and how they are complicit in the genocide in Gaza. So without further ado, we want to turn it over to our presenters. And I'm not sure who's going to go first, but I'm just going to let you guys handle it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just sharing my screen and then we'll get started. All right. I'm beginning with a BDS overview and recent successes across campuses in the United States. So BDS stands for Boycott, Disinvestment, and Sanctions, and the movement is decentralized, but the BDS National Council and Palestinian Campaign for Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel steer the movement. The BNC was formed in 2007 to help coordinate the BDS campaign, which was originally launched from a 2005 letter calling for BDS against Israel until they complied with international law and universal principles of human rights. Although Israel has been found guilty, they have not followed any of the uh, laws against them. And so BDS is a campaign to help get them to follow the international law. It was inspired by BDS campaign against South African apartheid, and specifically the students at universities were hoping to achieve financial pressure against South African apartheid, as well as help raise awareness and help with the public, social, and political pressure to not be complicit in apartheid. So the financial pressure focus that university students are currently focusing on are divestment and exclusion targets. So we are pressuring our university institutions to not procure new contracts and investments with complicit companies, as well as divest from complicit companies, which are primarily arms and technology companies, but also Israeli financial institutions, along with PACBI call to not engage with Israeli academic institutions. There's been pushes to cancel or get rid of exchange programs with Israeli universities. And so we will see that along with other successes in this snapshot, which has a mix of both public and private institutions, and they also vary in size from small colleges that are like 4,000 students to 20 to 40,000 undergraduate schools. And these are a non-exhaustive list and are going to be in reverse chronological order. So the most recent will be at the end. Also, these successes are primarily from the encampments that occurred during the spring of 2024. And so Portland State University, although did not fully divest, they did pause seeking and accepting gifts and grants from Boeing. Northwestern University in Chicago agreed to a series of steps publicly, including disclosing investments and also reestablishing the advisory committee on investment responsibility. That would include students and faculty. Evergreen State University in Olympia publicly agreed to establish a task force that would revise investment policies and also propose new language and socially responsible investment and divestments that would make sure to not include companies that profit from the occupation of Palestine. UC Riverside committed to gradual disclosure and another formation of a task force that would include students and faculty. They are to explore investing in a manner that would be financially and ethically sound. Also, their School of Business cut multiple exchange programs, but also their program with Israel, stating that it wasn't consistent with university policies. California State University created a public policy on socially responsible investment, with the goal being universal ethical investment policies. Although quite different from our institutions, it is still a higher education institution and in New York. And so I included the Union Theological Seminary, and their Board of Trustees adopted a divestment policy. San Francisco State University in California made sure that it would add a human rights-based investment strategy. And at the end of summer of 2024, they sold their shares in weapon manufacturers Caterpillar, Lockheed Martin, Leonardo, and Palantir. MIT discontinued the Lockheed Martin Seed Fund, which connected MIT students with the Lockheed Martin office in Israel, and confirmed it would not renew the contract. And in March of 2025, MIT dropped Elbit Systems from its industrial liaison program. The University of Michigan Graduate Employees Organization adopted a policy that would switch the union funds to not include invest weapons manufacturing companies. Massachusetts College of Art and Design amended its investment policy since their past one didn't align with its current mission. The University of San Francisco in May of this year announced plans to divest from GE Aerospace, L3Harris, Palantir, and RTX. And then also in May of this year, California Institute of the Arts, through their ethical investment work group, which was established in May 2024 after their encampment, got call-outs to publicly commit to divest from any entity directly, consistently, and knowingly involved in violations of human rights or violations of international law, particularly in conflict zones around the world. Potential key takeaways from these. I was lucky enough to attend a summer program with a member of University of San Francisco's SJP, and she mentioned that to get their divestment from weapons manufacturing companies announced, they did occupy the library since their university was no longer communicating with them. And although that was a successful tipping point, she did highlight that that was the tipping point after a long road of work. And so we could potentially invite them to share their strategies to show the big picture. Although I didn't go through all of the task force that arose in the spring of 2024. Evergreen State University, which is in Olympia, Washington, they're a public university of around 4,000 students. They did have their task force release public reports, and their task force has finished. And so this link, which I will put in the chat, has their final report, which appears that they got 3 of 7 resolutions passed. And I'm not sure what the university has done with their resolutions. But at the end of the investment report in Appendix D, there is a list of other schools' divestment policies, which could be a good resource. And then, although there are some past campaigns that weren't through the BDS lens, but we're just focused on divesting from Boeing, and so that could be another option to look to when looking for techniques. But now I will pass it off to focus on ESF.
Hello, I'm Luca. I also go to the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry here in Syracuse. I'm currently a senior. I was part of the BDS steering committee for a little bit, I think about a year ago, but then I didn't have the capacity to continue doing that. But yeah, I'm here today. I thought it would be helpful to go through a more detailed timeline of the process that I went through here at ESF. And sorry, I'm dealing with my tabs on my computer. Um, bear with me, sorry. Okay. Yeah, let me share my screen here. All right, I think we're in. So yeah, we're going to talk about the process of divestment from genocide here at SUNY ESF. And a lot of this work was done by students and faculty members that have since left the school. Just kind of the problem and nature of us with doing this kind of stuff at universities, the people coming in and out and having to pass the torch and things. Um, but yeah, we try to work through that, keep record of everything that we're doing and take notes and all that good stuff. So this started in late October 2023. Some students organized a walkout to protest how ESF and especially like SUNY as a whole funds the genocide in Palestine. And there were some student speakers, people gathered outside of the library, and it was calling for a divestment from weapons manufacturers. And actually, at this walkout, the president of our school, Joni Mahoney, she said that the college will commit that the ESF College Foundation will investigate divestments. And I'll get into this in a second, but the College Foundation is like a separate financial entity from the school that handles all the investments and everything. So that was a good thing that they're actually receptive to what we were calling for. Um, so before we get further, I kind of make sure outline the players here and what's happening as I reference them. So our group on campus, that's basically an SJP, but it wasn't called that, so it would be scrutinized. So we call it 315 Students for Liberation, because the area code here is 315. You'll see that written out 315 as per on the slides here. There's the president of our school, Joni Mahoney. We don't like her very much. I think it's kind of funny how her name rhymes, but I'm calling her Joni. And there's the ESF College Foundation and the College Foundation director, Brenda Greenfield. And Brenda was the main person that we were having correspondence with. So yeah, after this walkout, started communicating through email. And anytime you see these like arrows on screen here, that's an email that we're sending or they're sending. So first, sent an email to Joni and Brenda, trying to be amicable, wanting to work together in divestment that they said they were open to. And we appealed to like the ESF's stated values, which are to act locally and globally to improve our world, which obviously I think divesting from these horrible things would fall under that. And we also made sure to mention there's a history of divestment at the school starting in 2015. Some students led divestment from fossil fuels. And so we asked for a meeting to discuss these things. And we mentioned that we have a list of companies to divest from that we could provide. So then Brenda, the director of the College Foundation, emailed back. She was receptive. She asked if we could share that list of companies with her. and she explained to us some more details about how the College Foundation works and the mutual funds through which they do their investments. So as I mentioned earlier, it's a separate financial entity from the school itself. So it means she was telling us like the President Joni isn't actually involved in these kind of dealings. And the money that the College Foundation invests with comes from donations. Brenda uh, assured us that student tuition doesn't go towards these investments, which is good. But some of the money that is earned through these investments is then given to students through scholarships and things. And how this works is the College Foundation has like a board of directors and investment advisors. They select an external investment management firm to manage their investment portfolio. So they kind of let someone else deal with it. They don't get into the weeds of everything. And they use like established mutual funds. And these mutual funds split, like, they take money and manage it by splitting the investments across a wide range of companies, like hundreds of companies, and they're not all invested in the same amount. It's like split up based on different things. And Brenda was telling us that the school, the College Foundation, already has screens set up for what companies they invest in with the mutual funds. And their main focus was like harmful environmental impacts. So they had positive screens for companies that have a good track record in ESG, which is like environmental, social governance kind of ratings and things. They wanted to limit the carbon intensity of their portfolio. And they also have negative screens against companies with concerning practices such as tobacco, firearms, and child labor, which are obviously bad things, but there's also more bad things you wanted to make sure we're not invested in. Oh, okay. So then in January, so we still wanted to set up a meeting. So we emailed Brenda. We also want to appeal, use the, what is it, logos or whatever, appeal. So like the college also states in their like values and mission statement that they follow the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I also mentioned specifically SDG 16, which aims to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. So you think, if that's a mission for the school, I think they should follow through with that. So we provided them the list of problematic companies, and this was a list of companies. I'm pretty sure we just took straight from the American Friends Service Committee. They help with work with divestment, and they have a list on their website and different resources for divestment. I'm sure some of you know about that. So I sent them that list of companies, and our ask was, of course, for a meeting to discuss this, but also for them to implement actual policy language to commit to weapons divestment. So Brenda emailed back, and she said that with like her kind of quick look through, the College Foundation had no direct investments in any of the companies provided, but she told us that their investment advisors would search more thoroughly through the mutual funds to see if any of these companies showed up. And then in February, I actually had a meeting with the College Foundation with like Brenda and some of the other executive people and investment advisors. I wasn't at this meeting, but at this meeting, they shared that they did find 13 companies from my list that are in the mutual funds, but it was the amount of money invested in these companies was only about 0.5% of the total investments. This was below their like de minimis threshold, and so they were explaining this to us, and they said that traditional weapons companies are already excluded from their mutual funds through their screens through that, but the companies that these 13 companies still exist because they're big companies with multiple businesses, and they don't just do these terrible things. And they're explaining that there wasn't a very good way to be able to get rid of these companies while still maintaining their environmental and financial goals of good ESG companies and having a broad portfolio. And they looked into some other options, and none of the other mutual fund options were absolutely 100% not any sort of indirect investment in companies. And the College Foundation, our school, it's a small school and they're a small investor, so they don't have the money to afford more deluxe screening options. They can have more control and scrutiny of where these mutual funds are going. They're saying that even like the mutual funds, the companies that they're invested in will shift over time without them even knowing about it. And also went a little bit more into detail about how this worked for fossil fuel divestment. So it started in 2015, but they didn't just immediately divest from these companies. It's like a slow and gradual process. They didn't actually finish that until I think 2022. So like almost 7 years. But through that work, that divestment, most of the companies that were also weapons manufacturers and things were also divested from, which is good. And they're pretty working well together with us. They thought it was good to see that these kind of issues were gaining momentum, because it might mean that these mutual funds will be more pressured to divest from these companies. That means that a small investor like our school will be able to get away from the companies because of the little control that they have. But they did say they will look into policy language for setting a threshold for investments in these companies, that if that threshold is met, that they would look further into their mutual fund to consider other options. So here's a little more background on the fossil fuel divestment. Again, in 2015, and they didn't commit to a 100% divestment, but what they pledged to try to do was to have no direct investments in fossil fuels, which they did achieve, and to work to find mutual funds that allow them to divest from indirect investments, and to work to lower the carbon intensity of their portfolios with not invested in these greenhouse gas emitting companies. And again, it's a slow, gradual process, and they did end up switching mutual funds because of this. So then in March, the board of directors for the College Foundation had a meeting. They discussed the concerns they brought to them about the investment policy language. And apparently they were interested in reviewing the policy and implementing guidelines for divestment. Also in this month, our group met with Noam Perry from the American Friends Services Committee. Some of you may know him. We talked to him about what we were doing. He said ESF was special and unique among colleges, that they already had some guidelines about investments and socially responsible investments. They're being much more transparent than other colleges that he had seen. Also explaining that divestment itself doesn't do a whole lot, not necessarily the only be all end all goal, because at the end of the day, someone else is going to buy those stocks and still going to be money in it. But having the policy in place and making these sort of decisions with these things in mind is what it is important, because that means that over time, investments will decrease. They won't have new investments in these things. And this is going against the norms of only caring about money, more money, money. And so this is a good, important form of resistance. Mhm. Yeah, this was actually, so this happened without us even directly asking Brenda. Like, she just told us after the fact that they had this meeting, this happened. So that was good. And then we mentioned to Brenda that we drafted some policy language for divestment that they could use, and she asked us to share that. And this is what we sent to her. It's kind of a lot of words on here. Give you a second to look through it. So with this, it's the kind of thing where you aim for what you actually want, put everything in there, even though knowing you might not get everything that you want here. And so there's a lot of like specific naming here of companies involved in war, military occupation, armed conflicts, genocide, apartheid, etc. And again, like in the first point, trying to appeal to the values, the stated mission of the school and the fossil fuel divestment. So after this, as you all know, April, May, late spring 2024, there was an encampment at Syracuse University, which is literally right next door across the street from us. We share things, resources with their school. So there was a good amount of ESF students there. And during this time, you're able to work with Brenda from the College Foundation to make this kind of information that we discovered public. Because important symbol during this time that things are actually changing and putting pressure on people can work. And this was like a little post some people put together to share on Instagram. And yeah, the main thing, there was no direct investments in weapon manufacturers. They're interested in creating guidelines for divestment. This is kind of what I've been talking about here. And their current investments were minimal, very small, and weapon manufacturers. It's kind of below their threshold where they're really able to do anything about it. So yeah, it was a win that they were actually receptive to our concerns, and we're willing to move forward with policy language. So we learned over the summer, Koch Foundation actually did the executive board of that adopted and ratified an ethical investment policy. And Brenda described the purpose of this was to more fully describe our investment priorities, existing screening practices, and procedures for reviewing potential conflicts. And the investment policy language was really more focused on divestment from fossil fuels and greenhouse gases, harmful environmental practices. I guess being in environmental science school, they described a little bit more the kind of weighting they use for positive screens on investments. They have like an 85% weight on like carbon and 15% weight other like considerations, land use biodiversity, toxic spills, waste, water management. And the language was a little bit vague, not as specific as I may have liked, but they said that their other negative screens include some things like companies investing in coal, palm oil, factory farming, tobacco, child labor, private prisons, cluster munitions and landmines, and civilian firearms. And in this policy language, they also named that the investment management firm is Dimensional Fund Advisors, the company's called. I forget, I haven't looked into that too much. Maybe other college foundations also use them. I'm not sure. But the main important thing here was that they set a 2% threshold for concerning exposures. So for companies invested in these things like weapon manufacturers and the genocide and everything, if those investments reach 2% of the total investments, then they'll kind of trigger them to evaluate the mutual fund that they're using and consider other options, which is good to have an actual like concrete policy in place for this. Yeah, it's not, we aim for the stars and reach the moon or whatever, I guess, but it's still important that the school has very small investments in these weapon manufacturers. You're actually able to get them to put some real policy, some sort of policy language in place so that this doesn't get worse in the future, and hopefully gradually over time, they're able to decrease that already small amounts to hopefully zero. Yeah, I mean, that's about all I got for you here. That's kind of where we're at. Next steps would be, I mean, we'd like to follow through with them in the future to make sure they're actually abiding by this and see how it's coming along.